Let's go to Tanzania now, where opposition party the ACT Wazalendo says its campaign manager and its parliamentary candidate in semi-autonomous Zanzibar have been abducted by unknown assailants. This comes just days before elections, which are due on the 28th of October. Opposition parties have said in the lead-up to the election that their candidates' campaigns have been disrupted on several occasions, while dozens of parliamentary candidates were disqualified. The government has previously denied clamping down on dissent, but for more on the upcoming Tanzanian elections, I'm joined via Skype by researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, Ringisai Chikohomero. Mr. Chikohomero, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to The Globe. Hi, Mr. Chikohomero. Good evening to you. Welcome.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm very well, sir. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to The Globe.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're getting reports of alleged abductions. What have you heard with regards to that?
I think as you put it, we are having this information flowing in, I think, from early in the day of the alleged abduction of the campaign manager for the opposition in Zanzibar. And as you said now, these are still unconfirmed allegations, but it fits the script from what we have been reading and observing from the whole electoral environment in Tanzania ever since the formal kickoff of the campaign period in August. But even prior to that, the violence against opposition leadership has been prevalent, and it's something that has become commonplace.
But who could these allegations be attributed to?
Pardon?
Who could these allegations of abductions attributed to?
So there are two things that happen in an election campaign. There's always one, the reality of things, and one, and then the presentation of propaganda. Like what has been with these allegations that fit the script of what has been happening in the run-up to this election of well orchestrated violence against the opposition, and so many other subtle forms of intimidation. Now, what you have is two things. One, probably an attempt to derail the opposition campaign and the momentum that they've been building. If you look in the mainland Tanzania, Tundu Lissu has been building such momentum in his campaigns with such huge numbers in all places that his rallies, that they need, if I were to say, from a political election strategy to kind of derail such a momentum and pull it back. But also there is the other side where this could be just a form of such intimidation, where you already put in the people the fear of what would happen if elections were not to go in a certain way that is favorable to the establishment.
Yeah, let's talk about the election in greater detail. Has coronavirus in any way affected the election and, the campaigning and the rallies that have been taking place? We know that President Magufuli declared Tanzania virus-free in June, and, the government stopped publicly updating coronavirus data as early as in May. So has coronavirus had anything to do with the campaigning?
So it's a very sensitive area given where Tanzania is at the moment, and the biggest impact this is likely to have is on three things. One, the number of international election observers or even regional election observers who are willing or are prepared to risk their lives to go and do election observation in Tanzania. Two, the number of citizens who are very conscious and aware of the extent of the pandemic and how deadly that this disease is, who are willing to risk their lives and take part in the election, be it in attending rallies, in any attending political formations, but more so in actually going out to vote. It remains to be seen. It's interesting that the president of Tanzania has pushed this narrative that they are now COVID-free, but it remains to be seen. And no one in the region or international community believes that Tanzania is COVID-free. So that is a threat to international organization and especially the integrity of the election. And then on the other hand, you have Tanzanians themselves were expected to storm the ballot stations and cast their vote. The extent to which this perceived miracle where the coronavirus is no longer in existence in Tanzania is going to have on the turnout, the voter turnout in Tanzania is going to be an interesting observation for analysis.
When President John Magufuli took up office, he was branded as a champion of anti-corruption or an anti-corruption crusader. As a matter of fact, when he took up office, he instituted massive belt-tightening reforms that saw, the fortunes of the country in a way, improving for the better. But in recent years, possibly in recent months, he's been seen as one who is, cracking down on dissent and is hailed as a dictator. What could have possibly gone wrong?
There are two things that African leaders find themselves at cross-purpose with. One is that there is an understanding that economic progress and economic growth should not be disturbed by the claims of civil liberties and political rights. In that, in some instances, the case of Tanzania would mirror the case of Rwanda, where you are saying the end justifies the means. So when people were fired without due process being followed because they were corrupt, on one hand, it's to be applauded. On the other hand, when you breach the rule of law and you don't follow due processes, in the hope that the end justifies the means, you already create a system where institutions that are supposed to function and take up matters in a correct way are weakened over time. And the good that you might be trying to do is then whitewashed because the means that are being used are in themselves counter or at cross-purpose with developing strong institutions which are required for ensuring democracy and the growing economy.
And the opposition warns of election fraud. Do you think that the country's authorities will heed to those warnings? So
it's commonplace in Africa that now we even see in the United States that there's always claims of electoral fraud by the opposition and times by the incumbent. It's commonplace. But what you have in Tanzania is not so much an engineering of electoral rigging, but the institutions that are heavily biased towards the incumbent. The design of the institution, the electoral management in Tanzania, is heavily biased in favor of the incumbent. And this is what the opposition is really clamoring for. Their grievances are clear, that the National Electoral Commission is populated in a manner that makes them beholden to the president, to the incumbent. That the funding of the National Election Commission is such that it becomes beholden to the treasurer, to the minister and the government of the day. And this distorts or kind of creates an optic where there is assumed bias of the institutions that are supposed to be impartial.
And having said that, are you worried that the uneven electoral playing field will compromise the outcome of the process?
I think it's a cause for concern for all Africans and for all who are interested in the maturing democracy in Africa. It's a cause for concern that we cannot create a clear playing field where citizens, the will of the citizen is reflected in the electoral outcome.
All right, Mr. Chikohomero, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
That was researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, Ringisai Chikohomero, joining us live on the line. Let's take a quick break, and the Globe will continue shortly thereafter.